Hello and welcome to the First Impressions podcast. My name's Chris John Riley, and together with my co-host Martin McKay, we'll be talking to presenters at the upcoming FIRST conference taking place in Denver, Colorado between June 14th and 19th, 2026. We look forward to seeing you at the conference, and now we join our interview in progress. This time on the show, we're lucky enough to be talking to Merike Kaeo, founder of Double Shot Security and Virtual CISO, and lucky enough this year to be the program chair for the upcoming conference. Merike, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chris. Happy to be here.
So I've been really looking forward to talking to you after I saw what's going on at the conference this year and the various talks that are going on. Maybe you can give people a quick breakdown on kind of what the theme is for this year. I know that there's an interesting title for this year's conference.
Absolutely. So the conference is being held in Denver. And the title of the conference this year is Peak Defense, Building Adaptive Systems for Modern Threats. And the theme was inspired, of course, by the several iconic mountain peaks which are located near Denver. But it also emphasizes the purpose of the conference, the fact that we have to be adaptable. The key characteristics of incident response from a global perspective includes being flexible, resilient, and also having a willingness to learn, which are instrumental to build adaptive advanced capabilities to defend against newly emerging threats. And of course, with the increased automation, the language models, the large language models, as well as artificial intelligence, which is permeating all of our inboxes in terms of issues and news and tools, definitely we have to be very adaptable and we have to learn quickly and create resilience against new threats that are coming on an annual basis.
Certainly in the industry, it's been shaken up a little more recently, but over the last couple of years with the new LLMs coming out, as you mentioned, and the challenges there. And there's a number of talks that touch on those kind of themes, but you've also been working on some sub-classifications for the talks this year to kind of show the variety of talks that are going to be taking place.
Yeah, so this year's program is actually quite exciting. We wanted to make sure with the program committee, we had a 27-member program committee, that we did not have too many talks that delved into LLMs and AI and into the hype that, there is also a lot of hype with these automation tools. And so we selected very carefully and we made sure that we have a very holistic program when it comes to operational security and incident response. So the topics are extremely varied and they delve into threat intelligence tools, enhanced incident response, vulnerability disclosure talks, victim notification, training or tabletop exercises, how to build mature cyber capabilities in terms of your SOCs, any kind of CSIRT and information sharing build-outs, nation-state issues, also new threat actors and some of their campaigns. We talk about SOC improvements, also AI security frameworks that exist. And as you can see, the topics are really quite varied. They delve into product security, so PCERTs and software development lifecycle tools, as well as SOC implementations and also standards and frameworks. So we wanted to make sure that it's really well-rounded in terms of topics and also levels, right? So that there's talks that speak to folks that may not have a lot of experience or very basic, all the way to intermediate and advanced technical topics.
Alongside that, we were lucky enough to have a couple of good keynotes this year. Tim Brown, ex-SolarWinds, who obviously has some insights there into some of the modern day threats, but also some historical threats, as well as Chris Inglis, ex-NSA Deputy Director. It's important, as you mentioned, to have kind of that breadth of discussion between the technical side and the organizational side. How tricky was it to kind of make sure that is equal? I know some years there's a lot of talks that are very highly technical and there's other years where it's very much on the organizational side.
I think that it wasn't as difficult as one might expect. I was really happy to see that we had a lot of wonderful submissions, and they were really quite diverse. And the way that the program committee worked was that we started our work in September when the first issue that we had to deal with was actually creating a call for submission that resonates with potential speakers and also gives clear guidelines for what talks could get accepted. And once the call for submission ended, we then started the process of rating all of the talks that came in. Right. So we didn't even take into account any of the diversity that we needed to later on. But the initial step was to take a look at all of the talks, make sure that each talk had at least 4 or 5 reviewers, and then we started looking at the scoring. Initially, with the first reviews, we didn't even see who the author was, right? Because you didn't want to create any kind of bias when you did the scoring for the submissions.
Yeah.
And so once we had a scoring, then we started to look at, creating the program so you had the diversity of the session levels as a basic or more advanced, the geographic diversity of speakers and experiences, who the primary audience should be. Would it be technical versus management policy? And also, of course, the very top topics and having a good mix. And much to my surprise, it really wasn't that difficult to create that diversity, right? Towards the end, as you were picking some of the last talks, you had to make some decisions to look at that diversity. But for the most part, I think it's quite diverse in all of those aspects that I just mentioned.
Obviously, alongside kind of the usual things that we see at the conferences every year, the first intro session on the Sunday evening where people who haven't come to the conference can come and have the social to meet and greet with people, and then the Wednesday event where there's a banquet or other event to kind of socialize and bring the community together. There's also a number of very interesting talks. I'm very interested. What are you looking forward to mostly with your experience in operational strategic initiatives? Is there anything that jumps out that you're particularly interested in?
My interest is quite varied because I do holistic security overall and create strategies, usually on a global level. But the thing that interests me the most at this conference, or the topics rather, is really looking at operational efficiencies and automation because so many threats are coming our way, so many new vulnerabilities are getting discovered. And so, how do we automate and make sure that we're protecting our infrastructures, our networks, and how do we detect issues that may be occurring as quickly as possible and remediating them? And that's, I think, where a lot of the automation is coming in today, where in the past there was so much work done with proactive tools. But once you have an incident, then really it took longer than really it should to respond to it, mitigate, and resolve them. And so now with some of these AI enabled tools, you can automate better tools for remediating after an incident actually occurs.
We'll actually be spending some time later on in the podcast series to talk to a few of the speakers about some of these specific topics, specifically around response times for vulnerabilities and things like that. So I'm very interested to have those conversations and see what the community does together to come around this problem as a community at the conference. And it's particularly important, obviously, at these kind of conferences to be able to come together as a community and see how we can resolve these issues together.
Absolutely. And one topic that, or one area that I have a passion about is the what somebody called below the security poverty line, right? That was something coined by Wendy Nather. But it's really the underserved communities, right? The small, medium businesses. And I myself had instigated a project recently, an environment I'm working in, to create incident response plans for schools. And it's amazing to me how many organizations, I don't care how big or small you are, who don't have operational incident response plans. Now, these would not be the members of FIRST, right? These are the folks in the trenches. They absolutely know how to handle incidences. But how do you then translate that to so many of the businesses that cannot afford, right, even to outsource some sophisticated SOC teams? So, how do you create building something internally? And this is also something I'm looking for at this conference with these AI enabled SOC tools. What can be utilized by smaller and medium businesses so that they can potentially build it themselves and it won't cost so much money for them. And they can also create just more experiences and capabilities in house.
It's good to see the community coming together and thinking about these things, because obviously first tends to be the larger players in the game who have the resources, as you mentioned, to do these things. But being able to push that knowledge down and do what you've done, like coming up with incident response handbooks and guidelines and things that can help out smaller companies and individuals to improve their situation is totally what we should be doing as a broader community.
I 100% agree.
So is there anything that you want to talk about for the conference that we haven't touched on today?
I just hope that more people will become aware of FIRST, because there's a lot of organizations that I talk to who are not familiar with the FIRST community. And, everybody needs to understand incident response. And there's a lot of wonderful efforts that come out of the FIRST community that can be really useful to a lot of organizations. And so, even if you can't attend the conference, I would hope that people look at first.org and maybe could attend some regional events, because there are regional events that are happening throughout the globe, throughout the year.
It's a great call out. I mean, there's a number of events. There was one that took place recently in Munich, quite close to where I am. I'm in Zurich at the moment. And it's nice to see those kind of outreaches to different areas that might not get the focus of the larger conference. But communities are springing up all over the place, and these smaller conferences are a great place to share knowledge and really kind of get your foot in the door to what FIRST really is.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on this podcast.
Thanks very much for taking the time, and I look forward to seeing you at the conference.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the First Impressions podcast, the official podcast of the FIRST conference. The upcoming FIRST conference is taking place in Denver, Colorado between June 14th and 19th. Looking forward to seeing you there.